Hey folks, welcome back to the DarkHorse Podcast Livestream number 70 Q&A segment. We are raring to go.
We are. In the break, along with collating questions, our awesome moderator tells us that in our break, told us that the Seussian rhyming scheme is known as anapestic tetrameter. Anapestic referring to the emphases.
On the
1, 2, so dun 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 dun. Tetrameter referring to the number of syllables that one tends to combine into a set. So if we go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you would tend to have two sets of those.
So it's
less meaningful when you use just numbers.
It's less compelling. It is like iambic pentameter, except with different parameters, though. Sorry, I'm not going to pull that off, am I?
No, that was a strange move that you tried to pull back there, and I was just not having any of it.
All right.
Yeah.
I take it back. I regret it. I feel ashamed, chagrined.
Oh, we lost one of our cats.
I'm sure she'll turn up.
Okay, should we proceed?
Yes, let's do that.
We've got 3 questions from episode 67. 69. I don't know why it says 67 there. And then a question from Discord, and then we'll start in with your questions from today. First one. I'm surprised I included this one here because I don't remember this. What are your thoughts on the UK recently reporting almost 0 influenza cases? Don't you find it odd? So I don't know this, but I know that influenza cases are down in the U.S. Are supposedly down. So I don't want to accept an assumption, an axiom of the question, but we know that in the U.S. Flu cases are supposedly are reported to be down. Don't you find it odd is the question.
Well,
I don't find it odd.
I do not find it odd.
I don't find it odd at all. In fact, my explanation to my doctor when I saw her for an annual exam last October as to why I was not going to get the flu shot this year was I have so little potential exposure to the flu that I don't think I need it.
Yep.
This year, given behaviors, given lockdowns.
Right.
Yeah.
And, for what it's worth, we predicted that this would happen, that all kinds of infectious diseases would have a much harder time transmitting, that we might succeed against them quite dramatically during this year. I also think it is possible that Great Britain has a benefit that comes from its being an island. Obviously, it's not really perfectly an island given the channel and all, but the point is...
planes.
What? Well, there's always been a conduit, but my point about planes would be that the airline industry, in order to continue to function, has gotten very, very serious about how to control COVID. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the rigorous procedures that accompany mean that, well, A, there's a lot fewer people flying into Britain. B, they're coming in through a conduit in which there is a great deal of care being taken. So obviously, it can get in, and it could spread like wildfire inside of Britain.
Yep.
But the degree of control...
I don't know how porous the border at the Channel has remained. I don't know what kinds of blocks there have been.
Yeah, I don't know either. But I guess I would say a combination of A, Britain had a very bad phase with COVID because of the novel versions of the virus that were circulating. That resulted in... Well,
also because of their incompetent response early on, I think.
Yes, but we have this problem where every time you have an uptick, it causes an increase in measures to prevent it. And so the point is, incompetence leads to rapid spread, leads to panic, leads to lockdowns and other measures. And so the point is, it is very likely that flu season overlapped a set of more stringent measures that resulted in less circulation of regular flu.
Yes.
And that wouldn't be terribly surprising. And it's one of these things that could have gone differently if timing was slightly different or maybe they got lucky with respect to what made it across the border, that it could have come across the border in large numbers but didn't manage to. But anyway, there are lots of ways that you could imagine a population would be isolated enough and behave in a way that would prevent spread enough to see very low caseload.
Absolutely. Okay. Next question from last episode or last week. Oh, it's the same question. Okay. Oh, this person asked twice and didn't get through the first time. Okay. Are there different rates of DNA mutations in different species? And if so, what are the consequences of a higher or lower rate of mutation?
No doubt there are. Basically,
we have evidence of this. I did not go and look for the research on it, but
well, we certainly know it at some level of resolution. As for whether this is finely parsed between relatively closely related species, I don't know. What is certainly true, and in fact, even how you measure it, because the point is it varies across the genome. So, you would have to do, what are you averaging? And then you would have to figure out what to weight.
There's even differences in like assumptions of background rates of mutation when people are trying to calibrate molecular clocks and such, based on some empirical work, I believe.
Yep.
And it's just been a long time since I've looked at that directly, but
yep. Yeah. But the basic answer to the question is that you'll have a cost from mutations that do not contribute, but at a lineage level, you will have some advantage that comes from a greater ability to track change, right? To discover new opportunities and to track change. And so, a population in which you froze mutation at 0 would have the advantage of not having harmful mutations show up and cause damage, but it would have the cost of being stuck evolutionarily. And so you can imagine somewhere between those, you can play a game about how much mutation do you want.
Yeah. You might predict that the more variable the environment, the more rapidly changing the environment, the higher rate of mutation will evolve in response. Sort of like, lockdowns happen after the uptick already happens, but the selective response happens after the thing has already revealed itself. In this case, the rate of environmental change, for instance.
Right. You might predict that. Probably we will see it, but I would point out that this goes to this question of explorer modes. And at least in my opinion, a lot of the ability to track change is going to be housed in a layer that is not dictated by mutation. In other words, there are evolutionary mechanisms that I believe are yet to be explored that allow a much safer mechanism for dealing with change.
So do I hear you advocating for the use of explorer modes to discover explorer modes?
That will be true. It will be fractal. I will point out, though, that mutation in the case of something like HIV turns out to be part of its gift for escaping control of the immune system. So a high mutation rate in a RNA virus that doesn't, because the DNA, because the genes are not paired, there's a high mutation rate, and that high mutation rate is an adaptation in that case.
Very good. Okay, final question from episode 69. Invokes someone with whom I'm not familiar, but the concept will be familiar to both of us. Vysotsky. You know Vysotsky? Vysotsky's epigenetic compensation shows successive rat generations cope with a stressful legacy via dynamic phenotypic modifications. Humans too? The question is. So I don't know Vysotsky. It may well be that I have some Vysotsky papers on my computer here, but I think the kind of work that is being alluded to here with regard to epigenetic change in rats. Let's see. There's a paper about, I don't remember if it was rats or mice, but one of the models, one of the model organisms that are used in labs. Dads, males, being exposed to fear-inducing stuff before they become fathers. Yeah. And then in the species, the offspring never meet their dads. They don't know them at all. The only thing the dad contributes is sperm. And so there's like fear on board the adult male rat before he becomes a dad. Because it's a captive situation, the experimenters can guarantee that the dad never comes in contact with his offspring. And those offspring, I believe it was, and maybe even the F2, maybe even the generation after that, actually show a more fearful phenotype than the average rats do, which has been taken as evidence for epigenetic passing on of fearfulness for, sort of Lamarckian acquisition of personality traits that happen in the adult lifetime of a parent who never meets the offspring.
Yep.
We don't have any such experimental evidence from humans, as far as I know. Okay.
We do. There's a bunch of stuff here. At the narrow genetic level, there is work for intergenerational transfer of anti-famine responses, for example.
Oh, yes. Yes, there is. Yes.
So anyway, these things definitely exist. They exist at the molecular level, just as they apparently do for rodents.
That's going to be physiological, right? Not behavioral. Like multi-generational response to famine is going to be about basically holding on more tightly to resources, being more susceptible to
building up fat
and retaining fat.
Yeah.
Right.
I believe so.
Right.
You have to be really careful because sometimes there are lots of ways that experimentally you could make that inference and it wouldn't be justified based on what you actually measure.
Yeah, and I haven't spent any time with the literature on that.
But nonetheless, we do have good evidence of that. There's several different things that work this way. But I would also point out, with respect to humans, there's a whole different pathway for this to work. And it comes through the cultural layer in which, if your parent, look, actually, this works very well.
Yes, of course. And I think that's more interesting too. Just to be clear, like this question is clearly about the molecular. So what we've called, actually in our book, so the epigenetic sensu stricto, the modern molecular sense of epigenetic, meaning above the genome, but still at the molecular level. Modifiers of genes, and you're talking about what we've called epigenetic sensu lato, the broad meaning of affects everything going downstream, but isn't inherently molecular. Might be cultural, might be developmental, might be environmental.
Yep. So the basic answer to your question is it exists at a molecular level, but there's a much richer landscape of ways that this can happen for a human being, right? And I was just going to point out that, for example, the concern about anti-Semitism and genocide clearly is transmitted from one generation to the next, and
among Jews,
sure, that they're after the Holocaust, that these things, that there were deliberate mechanisms for transmitting them, and it results in mindset that presumably has no genetic component. That is to say, the difference between what took place before the Holocaust and what took place after the Holocaust has no molecular component.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm interested to know to what degree there are, molecular epigenetic mechanisms of things like mindset in humans. I think obviously because we are more software than any other organism on the planet, as we have said here and elsewhere many, many times, it is more likely that most of these things. Hey, Zach, you want to fix the cameras? Yep. We don't know what he's doing in there.
No. Probably drugs.
No matter.
Are you doing drugs?
No, you could just put us both on. Thank you. Okay. Probably.
That's reassuring.
Let's see, what was I saying? So the molecular, certainly there is epigenetic sensu lato stuff going on wherein humans are passing on changes that have effects downstream at the genetic level in terms of, who ends up leaving traces in the next generation. I don't know that we have any evidence of things like personality, like the fear response that is evidenced in this research that I was talking about in either rats or mice. So even like the multi-generational response to famine that I think there is no evidence for, that is a strictly and all of these borders are a little bit porous, but a physiological response, whereas fear is coming from the physiology, but seems like it's also more about software as well, right?
Well, it's behavioral, who knows?
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Okay. This from the Discord server this week, and I will say before I read it, I don't think you've seen it yet, that I would love to spend a while researching this before I answer the question, but I didn't. So we're just going to riff a little bit.
Yikes.
Given that topic, what do you think it is? I mean, given that preamble, I'm just going to hide it. I'm going to give you 3 guesses. What topic?
I think it's about. Is it about what Nixon knew about the Kennedy assassination?
It is.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right, that's wild.
No, it's about potatoes.
Oh.
The fruit of potato plants is toxic. Raw potatoes are toxic. Mashed potatoes, French fries, and potato chips are fueling obesity and heart disease. Are potatoes telling us just not to eat them? Should we leave potatoes alone? Who will win in the epic battle of man versus potato? So this is near and dear to my heart because I am a potato fan from the time I was tiny, and I have wondered this, and so there are a lot of places to go here, and we just don't have time to. Maybe there will be an episode down the road totally devoted to potatoes, but we'll go a couple places here. But one place to go to start is: are potatoes telling us just not to eat them? Of course they are. Right? Of course they are. Potatoes are the storage organs of the potato plants. The things that we call potatoes are the storage organs of the potato plants, and almost nothing in this world is designed to be eaten. There are very, very few things, and actually, I'll try to do a sort of a teaching thing here and not say what those very few things are until the end of our conversation here. So, think, those of you listening, about what those very few things are that are produced, in which the organism that is producing them has the intention of them being consumed by some other organism, and then be very well aware that things like potatoes are not on that list. So, of course, they don't want us to eat them, and of course, there are secondary compounds in them, as in all of the... God, what's the family of potatoes?
It's the nightshades. It's
I forgot it. Okay, well, so both of us drew a blank on the family of potatoes. That includes
Solanaceae.
Solanaceae, yeah, thank you. Includes tomatoes, includes eggplants, and yes, a lot of people actually can't abide any of those things, and it may well be that these particular secondary compounds are doing something that is distinct from what other secondary compounds do and are bad for many humans. I would say it's really unlikely that, for instance, Incans and other high Andean peoples, I think the potatoes were domesticated before the Incans. I'm not positive about that. Okay. So the pre-Incan Andean peoples who domesticated the potatoes, and the Incans who came in and took over everything, and then the Colombians who came in and took over everything after that, that all of those early peoples probably have an ability to deal with potatoes better than the rest of us do. And it's possible, for instance, that potato-rich cultures, like the Irish, like to some degree Western Europeans, have a better ability to deal with the particular compounds in the Solanaceae than the rest of us. But I'm not sure about that.
I am a little surprised by the beginning of your answer.
What's that? That I'm interested in potatoes?
Potatoes don't want to be eaten. My feeling is potatoes do want to be eaten, and that the same logic that says that chickens and cows and other creatures have a good deal.
You're going all pre-trans fallacy on me here.
Kinda,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
No, I just
do it.
So here's the thing: potatoes have a great deal with humans.
Wild potatoes don't want to get eaten.
Wild potatoes don't want to get eaten, and certainly the features of the potato chemically that make it dangerous derive from their secondary compounds of the potato, designed as poisons. Yes, they do poison us. It is interesting how easily they are removed by various methods.
Well, but maybe. I mean, I think that's part of the question here is, like, are they in fact? Does blanching and boiling and cooking and all that, like, actually release, denature, whatever it is? Like, I don't even know the nature of what the secondary compounds in potatoes is, what the molecular nature is, or what it is that you do to them to apparently render them harmless to us.
I think it is both water soluble and denaturing by heat.
So, is it that when people have bad reactions to potatoes, that process has been insufficiently done? Or have we insufficiently domesticated, through culinary means?
Yeah.
Or have we insufficiently domesticated the potatoes such that they are actually hanging on to something that we can't even get rid of by proper culinary means?
Well, look, I think a lot of this stuff comes down to something upstream of any of it. that basically something in our modern food supply is causing the immune system to see things in our guts that it's not supposed to see. And so many of us have these paradoxical allergies to things that we ate a lot of,
So
right?
maybe it's not potatoes, but it's industrially produced potatoes that have been grown with insecticides, pesticides, fertilizers.
It doesn't even have to be potatoes. It could be that GMO corn and the insecticide and other pesticides that are used on it, and it's not going to be insecticide, but the pesticides that are used on it are causing a breach in the gut that then causes the immune system to see whatever is in it. And whether it's honey or peanuts or wheat or potatoes or all of the above, the allergy is developed because the immune system is supposed to be insulated from the contents of the gut, and in this case it isn't.
So I don't think you spelled that out sufficiently. It took me a minute to realize where you were going, and we've been here together, which is that the idea is that something in our diet as a result of the industrial food production pathway is creating leaky gut syndrome. It's creating holes in the gut that is a breach between, just as we are supposed to have a blood-brain barrier, we're supposed to have a gut sort of immune system barrier.
Yeah, and wait, I have to be careful there because we're going to get flagged, okay? There is some immunity that is supposed to contact what is in the gut, but there's a lot of the immune system that isn't supposed to see it. And what I'm saying is that a breach of that boundary, now go.
I don't know what I was doing.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
But yes, that a breach in that boundary causes the immune system to see something which it regards as foreign. Basically, it is programmed to see anything it doesn't recognize as foreign, and it is supposed to be shielded from seeing the contents of the gut. But instead, it sees the stuff in the gut, responds to it as if it is a foreign invader, and then it generates an immunity that's lasting.
Okay, so again, the thing that you skipped, which is where I was trying to go before, is the idea is that whatever it is that is causing the holes in the gut, if you ate it with anything else, those things also, even if they were produced, organically and in the style in which they evolved, if you ate them in the same meal, they may trigger the same immune response and you may become allergic to them similarly. So, but that is the key point that I think that you keep eliding.
Okay. I agree that this is true. The reason that I'm eliding it is that it isn't that important in light of the fact.
But it was the main thing that you were saying about, I don't think it's even, it doesn't have to be.
I agree. It's necessary to understand it at that level. But the reason that it doesn't matter in practice is that basically we are encountering a lot of these molecules. Unless you're taking steps to avoid these molecules, the point is you have some chronic issue, and then so what you are likely to develop.
I don't like this argument.
Hold on. What you are likely to develop is an immunity to whatever is most common in your diet that triggers your immune system.
Okay, but I don't like this argument because basically what you're saying, all is lost. You can't control things.
I'm not saying that.
There's no way to do, for instance, an elimination diet and actually get there. And the problem is that it has to happen. You have to have a more pure diet as children,
right?
And not have such complexity. But the idea that it's so noisy you cannot fix it strikes me as a hopeless note that I'm not interested in getting on board with.
Saying. I'm not saying you cannot fix it. And if you have these issues, and most of us probably have one or more of them, so I highly recommend figuring out what's triggering you.
Like doing an actual elimination diet in which you cannot cheat at all.
And you have to do it for weeks in order to see the effect. But my own experience says things that I didn't even know were symptoms of anything turned out to go away when I got wheat out of my diet.
Yeah.
So you may not know that you even have a problem until you try it. But then the point is, the way to deal with this that's best is to protect your kids from it so that they don't develop these immunities to their food, right? We've done a good job of that, I think.
Imperfect, but
it doesn't have to be perfect. The point is, if you reduce the level of exposure sufficiently low, you don't develop these immunities. Hopefully our kids have evaded them.
Yeah.
If you have not had that because you, for whatever reason, didn't know, then the point is you'll develop the immunities. You're probably stuck with them for life. At that point, what you need to do is not create more of them and then figure out what foods you're sensitive to and really avoid them effectively. And that is readily possible. It's a pain in the butt, I got to tell you. I don't like having to be, I was recently describing to some friends our recent trip to Italy. And in Italy, the idea that you can't eat wheat it's a rare phenomenon, and we don't speak Italian. And so it's hard to even travel in Italy and even ask the question.
Yeah. And by recently, you mean in the before times.
In the before times, very late in the before times.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's not easy, but getting that stuff out of your out of your diet is a huge benefit to health if you have the allergies.
Okay, so two things. You said, I can't believe you started with potatoes don't want to get eaten, and then you didn't get to the punchline of that. You didn't go full circle.
So I believe potatoes do want to get eaten in the same way that a chicken or a cow does. That the fact is there are many more chickens and cows than there are bison and jungle fowl on Earth. That evolutionarily it's a good deal. Mm-hmm. And so as long as they're humanely treated, the point is,
Right. Human selection has created organisms that have benefited from being part of our cuisine.
Right.
But with regard to the individual plant, potatoes are not part of an individual plant that is designed to be eaten pre-domestication by humans. And so now, and I think we just need to move on.
Yeah.
Now I want to provide the answer to the question about what does want to be eaten. Put aside the sort of pre-trans fallacy answer that is, you have things that do want to be eaten and things that don't, and now we know what's true. And then actually domesticated animals and plants have a different deal set up with organisms. That was your objection. But pre-domestication and also including domestication, you have basically three categories of things that are, well, maybe four actually, in some ways, which we don't list in our book. But I'm gonna pose a fourth one to you here.
Okay.
And I think it's a slightly different category. But there's basically three types of things that are designed to be eaten. It's milk. It's mammalian milk, and it is fruit, which is created by plants after seed set as a reward for their would-be distributors to eat the fruit and distribute the seeds either by spitting them out or pooping them out somewhere far enough from the parent plant that they get dispersed, and then nectar, which is earlier in some plants' lives, the sugar reward. And I was going to add a fourth one, but why are you making a face?
Well, if we're going to say nectar, then we got to deal with all sorts of stuff like what are they? Bayesian bodies and acacia trees. If we're talking about things that are designed to feed other creatures, I believe the list is going to be longer.
Yeah, but we drink some nectar. Not a lot.
It's
Not
pretty.
a lot.
Yeah, a little hibiscus tea kind of.
Yeah, even hibiscus, though, we eat the whole flower.
Yeah,
we take the whole flower. No plant wants its entire flower eaten. That's interesting. So it's possible we've got like 3 days left to make modifications on our book. So maybe we should modify that, but maybe not. But honey. And it's not designed to be eaten by us.
Yeah.
And just like mammal's milk is not, designed, the intention is not for it to be eaten by adults. And we have humans have turned that into several culinary traditions. But honey is food for baby bees, right?
Yeah, but this is just going to get so messy if the point is designed to be eaten by anybody. Mm-hmm. The yolk of an egg is designed to be eaten by an embryo. Mm-hmm. I mean, so it just you can go a long way.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, fruit and milk.
Yeah.
From the point of view of us.
Yeah. Okay, so we have two Seussian rhymes that are, because of the nature of Super Chat, all squashed here, but I will try to do justice to them. The woke have spoke, I'm sad to say. What spoke the woke upon this day? They spoke that wokeness can't abide, can't tolerate, can't take in stride the slightest thought or quip or fact that leaves their wokeness unintact.
Hell yeah, that's great.
Yeah, hashtag Clubhouse.
Brilliant.
That was great, yeah. And then, I too tend to write aping Seuss's milieu, but I must credit brother Shel Silverstein too. His rigorous rhymes and fantastical bent delivered much cleverly moral content. Hashtag rock on Dr. Weinstein.
Awesome. Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, they're great.
Oh man, yeah. I hope this becomes a thing.
Yeah, so please, if either of you guys are on Twitter, like put if they're under the word count, character count, put those on Twitter with the hashtag. What is it? Loose the Seuss. Loose the Seuss.
I should say that in tweeting out the link to the live stream, mm-hmm. I wrote a little more Seussian verse, mm-hmm. but the character limit was onerous, and I ended up using emojis to substitute for certain words to get the character count down. And because it rhymes, actually you can infer, even though like I have eyes and I mean to imply the word see, you can figure it out from the rhyme.
What's an emoji? Is it one character? I don't think
Yeah,
I've
it
ever
counts
used-
as one character.
Okay.
But anyway, if you're having trouble, use that, and don't hesitate to use multiple tweets linked together. Use the plus symbol at the bottom of a tweet to add a tweet to the thread. This could be great.
Cool. Yeah, love it. Okay. Also, your son is laughing at maybe us, but I think you.
I believe he's snickering.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like you were sniffling.
Oh, okay. Thanks for taking care of the yelling cat, incidentally, Zachary. Oh, no, he's gone operatic on us. It's true. Setting aside all ethical concerns, what surprising new forms and features could humans be selectively bred to possess? Furthermore, what forms and features are we likely to engineer into future generations? Where do you think CRISPR-Cas9 takes us? Big question.
In the remote future, I hope that humans suck a great deal less. No. So, I will give my usual disclaimer about CRISPR-Cas9. We have the typewriter, but we don't have the the Rosetta Stone. Nobody speaks gene is the problem. Nobody speaks gene. We cannot write genes de novo, right? So I'm skeptical for two reasons. One, our technology isn't as good as the brochure would have you believe at making improvements. And B, nature is really hard to beat. Now, there are places.
I'm sorry, but this is exactly why gain of function research is what it is. It's like, we can't do this yet, so we're going to let evolution take a shot and see if it can create kind of the neighborhood of what we're looking for.
Yeah, you use serial passaging. I mean, in fact, that crazy paper, the Christian Andersen paper in Nature that keeps being pointed to.
From like March or April of last year.
Yeah, that says, well, this isn't a designed virus because we would have thought the spike protein would fail with this conformation.
You could take it from me. If I had been doing this research, I would not have created that thing.
Right, which, it is true, I think, that nobody would have designed the spike protein we got. It is not true that the protocols we use in the lab wouldn't have put together that spike protein.
Do you think that's intentionally confusing? Do you think he was putting that out into the world in order to be confusing? Because he's certainly aware of what serial passaging and gain of function research is.
Well, I would just say that the history of those two papers, the Lancet paper and
which
the
is
Nature
like the 27 multi-authored paper just saying,
Yep.
Don't worry about it, nothing to see here.
Let's put it this. You've got Dasic on one, on the Lancet paper, and you've got Dasic not named in the second one, but there is an email chain that puts him behind it. And so I do have the sense
he was at least consulted.
Yeah, that the paper, I hesitate to say anybody deliberately wrote anything that they knew was false. On the other hand, it's really hard to figure out how somebody who is as prominent would have come up with something so obviously and transparently wrong.
Well, but I mean, but it has worked.
Yes.
Right? Like the confusion, like it hadn't even occurred to me. I think we've said this on this live stream before. It hadn't even occurred to me until maybe after we were on Mar, even at the end of January, that some people heard lab leak and thought created de novo from scratch by humans.
Right.
Like it literally never occurred to me that someone could hear lab leak and think that. And that's partially, my ignorance. But it also, like that Anderson paper, specifically created that narrative.
Yep.
It created it, and I don't know if it existed before.
Well, so at least the following. At least the fact that people, not knowing what these sorts of techniques are, would hear, oh, did this leak from a laboratory, and might think, diabolical geniuses writing viruses in private for, weapons purposes or whatever. It was incumbent on those who are well placed in this to say, actually, that's not what's being discussed. What we are discussing is something like the hybridizing of viruses that we get from nature, or the use of serial passaging to enhance viruses that we get from nature, or a combination thereof, or the splicing in of a gene individually from some place that we want. However, we don't believe that happened because, and then make your damn argument. But that they didn't do that. They took the advantage of people's fanciful imaginations as to what was being alleged in order to hide and say none of that could possibly have happened, and you'd have to be a fool to think it could. Right. And so, yes, it is extremely misleading.
Yeah, at best. Okay. I have 2 number 8s here for some reason. My absolute favorite, this probably came in before we were talking about it. My absolute favorite Dr. Seuss book is I Had Trouble in Getting to Salisaloo. It's difficult to find, but so worth it. A good lesson on facing one's fears and humorous on multiple levels. Would recommend to all your viewers. So yes, as I did. Project Veritas recorded CNN morning meetings during the election. I heard a group of people believing everything they published. At that moment, I realized how much trouble we're in. How are we going to fix this country if we're not on the same moral spectrum?
Yeah, I heard those same reports, and I will say that I think this is a key insight, that these discussions on the inside don't sound like the villainous people that you imagine. They sound like people who are in a room full of people who won't challenge wrong ideas, and so they get carried away, and basically there's a sense of like, well, we know what the truth is and it is our job to dispense it, rather than it is our job to report and let people decide.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it very easily goes off the rails. But yeah, it is interesting how many things are broken and how deeply, and it is we're going to have to fix this, but it's not entirely obvious how that gets done.
Yeah.
We're at 37 minutes.
Okay. Well, we are going to keep going for a while. I remember who Waddington is now. So we got 3 questions here. I'm like, I just don't know who these people are. I don't know how to respond to them. But this first one, how might Waddington's canalization of the epigenetic landscape pertain to 21st century digital behaviors? Is social media an epigenetic canyon? So I think just this term, canalization, is very useful, and I think it's a brilliant term because it's one of the few terms of art that actually immediately evokes what it's supposed to. So the idea that there are, I usually think of it as developmental, but that you end up, we have much more capacity than we use, and then by using one particular path, a canal, say. Imagine water finding its way down hills. You have, 5 paths that it's taking. And then as the water starts to be funneled for whatever initial condition that maybe doesn't matter at all and maybe does have an adaptive value, it starts to funnel into one more than the other. Ultimately, you end up with only one. And as those other streams dry up, you actually, the ability of water to flow into any of those other former channels becomes almost nil, or perhaps completely nil. And so then at the cellular level, you would get something like apoptosis, like actually cell death, and you don't have your neuron die off as we have. We're born, or at least very early in development as embryos. We have many more neurons than we do by the time we're 3 or so, and that's not a problem. That's a feature.
Yep. So the analogy that the questioner is asking is about social media, and there's no question that there is a lot of this going on, and one has to keep in mind that the algorithms that then create the channels that people find are not stable, which has 2 impacts. It means that it is very hard to track impact, right? Just ask yourself this question. Has anybody kept track of the changes in the algorithms in a way that a future historian could go back and say, well, did we go crazy because of X behavior of the platforms, so that they could check and say, well, actually, no, that's not true, because here the behavior happened and the response to it didn't happen until 6 months later, or something like that. As far as I know, nobody's doing the history, and so we can't even check what's true. We can't even evaluate what world we're living in, right? So it's a pernicious world rather than a natural world.
Yeah.
And the other thing, what is the other thing? The other thing, I said there were 2 impacts of this.
In social media, canalization of social media.
Yeah. So one is that the instability causes a discontinuity between the path that was and the path that is. And the other thing is that you can't check what is taking place and correct your own behavior relative to it.
Right.
For example,
So I guess that's a canalization. So, the usual metaphor there is silos. But canalization, once you're on a different path, you can't see into the next. Is that what you're saying? Or you're saying something different?
No matter what you're doing, let's say that you come up with a mechanism for reaching out to people who aren't in your silo in a way that causes them to interact with your stuff and do so positively. And then the algorithm changes. And so instead of being in contact with the people that you had found, you're in contact with something adjacent that doesn't respond to you so well. And you don't know whether your behavior has changed or whether or not, or you've been moved by something you don't know. You and I don't know why the rate of accumulation of subscribers to our YouTube channel, and I would say that in reference to my Twitter account, the same thing is true. Suddenly these numbers
slowed to a crawl.
Slowed to an absolute freaking crawl. And it is hard to imagine that this is in any way natural, because at the same time, viewership is going up. So something has occurred.
Yeah. And the adjacent channel, the Clips channel, is continuing to go up as... Anyway, yeah. So there's something going on there.
Yeah, something going on. But in any case, the inability to even know, even if you could just say, look, it's static, and I'm going to now learn how to move around this landscape, right? That would be a very different world.
You don't get to do that,
right? You don't get to do that.
No. I don't know who the first person in this suggestion is. Rather, please consider interviewing Bill Whittle and Scott Adams on the topics of Trump, pathos, and pro-America unity. I feel that such cross-aisle discourse would be fruitful and serve as an example to others. #Heal the divide.
Yep, I think those are very interesting suggestions.
Is?
Barely.
Okay.
I know Scott Adams better, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think reasonable people on the so-called other side. Not that we really have an other side, given the eclectic.
You know what side I'm on?
Tell me.
I'm on the side of humanity.
What?
I know.
Oh man,
but
I'm so sick of them.
That includes future humanity. I am too.
Oh.
Like I was much more of a misanthrope than you ever were when we were first together, and really until I started teaching.
Yeah.
But that includes future humanity, which is I often have an easier time around the non-human members of our inhabitants of our planet, but so we need them around.
Future humanity is not pissing me off nearly so much yet.
Yeah, whereas the woke are busy being furiously pissed off by past humanity.
Yes, they have a gun to the head of future humanity, which if future humanity knew about it would be none too pleased.
Okay, and then this one, just because we say that we answer questions in this first hour roughly by the dollar amount, and so this one came in at a high dollar amount, but I don't know what it means. Is there an attempted cancellation of HART, capital H-A-R-T, at the moment? Take your time. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what a heart is. Who a heart is.
I don't know.
Okay, so
I don't know.
I'm not. At some point when we get our new. When the new question asking system goes online, there's going to be some slightly more complicated rubric, and I don't know that we won't feel quite so compelled to answer questions that we just have no idea what it means. But there it is. Nature announced 1% of scientists, Nature, the journal, announced.
It'd be cooler if it was
Nature announced.
Nature.
Yes.
It's like Nature announced, and scientists now think.
Yes. Follow nature.
Ooh.
Yeah, not the journal.
No. I mean, you could, but
I mean, I get their table of contents every week, but I'm occasionally edified by them. Nature announced 1% of scientists capture more than 1/5 of global citations. Are 1% of scientists genius, or is eigenvector centrality flawed, or something else? And why can't I easily access academic articles? Oh my God. So that second question deserves, well, frankly, its own complete podcast, like not just its own episode, but like someone needs to devote a podcast to.
It's a deep rabbit hole.
Yeah, and we did, I think it was episode 6, frankly, that we spent half of the time talking about peer review and the problems therein. But, I'm in the scientific literature to some degree every day. And when our current positions at Princeton come to an end this summer, that will become much, much, much harder. And I don't, and the fact that most people don't have academic positions at all. And so, most people are compelled that they wouldn't understand the literature anyway, and so they don't really need access to it. But what that does is that it allows the people who are masquerading as like science journalists, and some of them actually are, but many of them really are not and do not understand anything, to report out to you what the scientists are actually saying. And as we have revealed over and over and over again on this podcast, many times they get it wrong. And sometimes they get it wrong because the science is bad and they didn't know. And sometimes they get it wrong because the science journalists don't know what they're doing and they're incompetent. But even if you feel like you don't have the background to interpret it, it would be better if we all had access to the entire scientific literature. And this was something we talked about, starting almost a year ago when we started these podcasts. At that point, so much of the COVID literature was on preprint servers that it really was available to everyone.
Yep.
And it was like the Wild West in the good sense.
Yep.
So
the Wild West in the good sense.
Right.
Yep.
Why
Where
can't
the hats were tall and the women were strong.
and all the children were above average.
Exactly.
Why can't I easily access academic articles? Yeah. So, to be returned to, but I wish we all could. And I know that, we're in this privileged position at the moment and we're about to lose that privileged position. And there are a few ways in, but they're clunky and kludgy and you still don't get the kind of access that you do if you are, frankly, faculty, student, or staff at an institution of higher ed. And that's pretty much the access.
I would also point out, you paid for the research. You are entitled to see the product of it.
Your tax dollars hard at work.
I mean, NIH and NSF fund so much of this stuff that the idea that this was privately generated and therefore they're entitled to profit on it and hide it from us is preposterous.
Yeah.
This motivated. Why am I blanking on his name? The internet's own boy, Aaron Schwartz.
Oh.
Aaron Schwartz was driven to commit suicide, believing the same thing. He attempted to liberate literature and was hounded to an early grave. And so, anyway, many of us get the severe problem here, and frankly, it's time to do something about it.
As for the first part of the question, are 1% of scientists geniuses, or are the eigenvector centrality flawed or something else? Some scientists are geniuses, for sure. Is that the 1% of scientists who are capturing 1/5 of global citations? A tiny percentage of those, I would think. But a lot of those global citation indices are based on popularity and being adept with the social part of the system rather than being particularly adept with the science.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, which is that in a perfectly functional system, you might find that 1% of the scientists were capturing some large fraction.
And it was just, and it meant that we were actually making progress faster than we would if those people were cited less commonly. But
right, and if you think about the way science works, you may need an awful lot of people hunting to make a small number of finds that change everything.
Absolutely.
So there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I agree with you. I think the chances that the most highly cited people are the most insightful. I mean, for one thing, you're given the way things work, people with seniority through peer review have access to what everybody else is working on, and they steal a ton of stuff. And
yes,
so
they do.
It would not be surprising if the most adept thieves ended up in that elite category of highly cited authors. Also charlatans who managed to surf the academic landscape.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Next question. Have you ever heard the term cultural literacy? And since you didn't know who Jar Jar Binks was, and you've probably never seen Star Wars, do you think you two are culturally literate? So we did know who Jar Jar Binks was. We just couldn't imagine what the thing looked like. And we have seen Star Wars, but we're just not big fans.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the originals when they came out, right? The 3 starting in whatever it was, 1977 when we were tiny.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen any of the rest of them. And cultural literacy to me more often refers to being familiar with the idea that other cultures, at least in anthropology, which is, field from which with which I am familiar, it refers more to really understanding what parts of what you understand to be true and universal are actually particular to your own state of being. And so, at a moment in the world when there is so much, pop everything being produced, the idea that it is anyone's responsibility to be knowledgeable about all of the stuff out there is absurd. And so, it's just like saying, oh, to be literate, you have to have read everything that was written before 2000 or something, like everything.
Yeah.
Nope, that's not what literacy means, just like that's not what cultural literacy should mean.
Yeah.
But, I imagine that there's different, this question may have a different meaning of cultural literacy, and I think it's probably being used a lot, but
there's got to be some sort of, if you're totally tuned out, then it does cost you in terms of what you can say about why human beings are behaving the way they are.
Yeah.
Right? If you've never been on social media, how would you know what these people were responding to, for example?
But again, for another time, it would be interesting for us to pretend to be on totally opposite sides of that issue, because I think I am natively a bit more towards I'm actually not going to know that thing. I'm not going to expose myself to that. I'm more of a Luddite.
There's a value.
I was never on social media until 2017. And even as a teenager, I didn't go there. I didn't follow, there was no social media in the mid-late 80s, but I explicitly avoided the trends and the fashions and listening to what other people were listening to and, reading the things that everyone was reading at the moment, because it seemed to me then like it was at risk of being so much information that was social, and it was obscuring whatever value there might be in any of those things, because it was of the moment and social rather than having had time to cement itself into meaning, that it would be even hard for a person who was trying to find the meaning in any given thing, what that meaning might be.
Of course.
Yeah.
Drowning in information and starving for meaning. I forget who said that, but I'm not arguing that you wouldn't necessarily, you might be better off and smarter if you've never been on social media. On the other hand, you would be limited in terms of your ability to say why people are behaving the way they are.
Yep.
If you just had no experience with it, if you didn't know what it was like to have a post get a bunch of likes and have some other thing that you were more fond of getting on, and
No, and having a shared cultural base is absolutely meaningful. And so, you and I, it's been noted, like we now use the word grok on a regular basis. And I used it very occasionally before I reread Strangers in a Strange Land by Heinlein, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. Actually, no, I was actually reading it on our study abroad in Ecuador trip. So that would have been 5 years ago. And it just, at that point, being re-exposed to it in context in that novel went like, oh, no, this is actually a good word. We're going to use that. And when you say it to an audience, for instance, that doesn't necessarily know what it means, use it in context enough, it becomes meaningful. Yeah. Whereas if we refer to, 42 being the answer to life, the universe, and everything, you can't derive that from first principles, that we're talking about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And yet you and I are not going to stop referring to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy because that one's important to us and was formative, just like Seuss, right? Like, those three things, feel relevant to us. And so we are helping to create a sort of cultural milieu here. And there will be other stuff of value that we're not familiar with. And then there's also a lot of stuff that we're just not paying attention to. And some of that will have value, but a lot of it won't. And you have to, you do end up instantiating some rules, and they will never be perfect.
Yep. And there's just too much to know it all, as you alluded to earlier.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more, and then we'll go to 3 more, and then we'll go to the next ones. As a self-published author, I almost exclusively rely on Amazon KDP, which I don't know what that is, but I think it's clear in the rest of the question. So as a self-published author, I almost exclusively rely on Amazon KDP. It's an amazing tool. I was already having trouble just giving away free PDFs of my original work while watching crappy woke remakes get mainlined. Now I fear Amazon might pull my stuff, not even for anything in the work itself, but for simply being pro-Trump and center-right. What can authors do when conventions are closed due to COVID and block people and people block ads online? So that is a real question to which we don't have the answer, and it's part of the reason that it's one tiny part of the reason that lockdowns have to end soon.
There are 2 levels of this.
And
there is no
to be
answer.
Allowed to meet.
There's no answer for individuals to overcome the thing, right? There can't be.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there's not a collective response answer. And there's a lot of stuff in blockchain space, for example, that suggests a possible answer to this question. And it's probably something that we need to do a podcast on so that you can get a sense for what people are thinking about if things get worse, right? If the book burning continues, what do we do? And anyway, we should probably put that together.
Okay. If cats, so this is a two-part question, but I'm just going to read one so we can get to some more. If cats domesticated themselves, we attracted mice that attracted them. Could a similar thing be happening with deer?
Yeah, of course.
I like this question. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, it's
and we actually there is published research out, and I had some students who did their own small versions of it as quarter-long research projects that show that in industrialized area, in urban areas, deer are changing when in the circadian cycle they're active. So they are responding to us, and that doesn't say domesticating, that says evolving, but I suspect that they are domesticating themselves.
Well, I think it's an artificial distinction. I think there's a question of what the niche is in and around people.
Domesticating is a subset.
I
think it's a subset. I think that you can be evolving without being domesticated.
Of course, but there is a niche. It is near people. Some of those niches are deer-like. They're not going to move into our homes. It'd be too dangerous. Some of those niches are cat-like. The interesting thing
but adapting to deal with humanity's spewing of light everywhere, for instance, as say, I don't know if chickadees or kinglets do it, but just pick some songbird that no one is saying, they seem to be, there are lots of organisms that are doing better as a result of our activity, but with which we have no particular relationship and are not, other than those of us who like the birds to be around, we're not benefiting from them being around. No one is talking about them being domesticated, but they are evolving in response to being in our milieu.
Right. All I'm saying is, and we have to be careful about this. There are lots of things you can't draw a border between that are nonetheless real, but I'm not sure what the border even means in this case.
With deer?
No, with what it means to self-domesticate versus to evolve to some niche that is created by humans.
Well, one of the things that has been talked about, I don't know that I stand by this, but one of the sets of traits that people often point to when they're saying things like, are humans, did humans self-domesticate, for instance, right? Or, how do we, what is it that we're seeing? Like, what is happening with foxes when they get domesticated in the Russian experiments is a pedomorphosis, which is often called neoteny, but neoteny is actually a subset of pedomorphosis, not the other way around. So it's retaining of juvenile characteristics in the adult form. And we know that, when you're an adult, you are reproductively capable. So while you are reproductively capable, you retain juvenile characteristics like bigger eyes and bigger hands and feet, or I wanted to say something about the ears, but I'm not sure there's anything about the ears.
But again,
floppy ears in the case of canids. Yeah,
we've got lots of pedomorphosis that has nothing to do with anything you would call self-domestication. I guess what I'm saying is I have the sense
you got that backwards though. So I'm not saying that I'm going to defend the definition, but if the definition is, if it's right, then you would be looking for evidence of pedomorphosis in order to start thinking, okay, that's self-domestication. Absent the pedomorphosis, then it's not self-domestication. Not all pedomorphosis is evidence of self-domestication.
No, I know you're not saying that. My sense is every time I run into this self-domesticated thing and the fact that it is applied to people, did we domesticate ourselves?
Yeah, I find it uninteresting too.
Not even uninteresting. I find it a garbage category that's been added and has caused the conversation to become more confused.
But that was just an example. This question isn't about self-domestication. It's about domestication and whether or not domestication inherently involves a pedomorphosis, as it appears to have in cats and in dogs and in wild canids, and I don't know what the other examples are. But so, that's all. And again, I'm not saying that I'm defending this definition, but that if we found reason to defend it, then that would be an indicator of, okay, these things are adapting and thriving around humans, but we see no evidence of pedomorphosis. Therefore, we're not seeing them as domesticated. I'm not sure. I think neither you nor I are particularly interested in, exactly where these boundaries are.
Yeah.
But I think just trying to figure out what you would need to be true if you agreed on definitions. Okay, one more question here, and then we'll go to this hour. This one is important. Actually, I'm glad we got to this one. As scientists trained in both taxonomy and critical thinking, please help settle a critically important debate once and for all. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Love the channel. Thanks for all you do.
Well, they're not going to like this.
Aren't they?
But a hot dog is, in fact, a calzone. I mean...
Okay.
All right. See?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. Did it.
Right.
It could
Gordian knot.
arguably be a taco.
Oh, okay. So Zach, you want to put on your mic to tell us that, or are you just gonna? You want
Yeah,
to repeat
I was just saying that it could arguably be a taco.
hot dog. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay. So Zach, did you put in a line for me here?
I did.
You did. Happy belated birthday, oh Captain, my Captain. That's for you.
Thank you.
Yes. Everyone else in the family has a birthday in April, except
Yep.
the animals. They were all born in March. The non-human animals.
Yep.
Different marches.
And different drummers.
Totally different drummers. Yeah. Okay, here's a 3-part question, or at least one written in 3 lines here. Okay. Bret. Oh boy. This has a lot of shorthand, so I'm going to try to read it. Hi, friend. To me, Bret, you can read it with me if you want, although you're likely to have a harder time with it than I am. To me, Bret, you incarnate Mind Power by J. Brown. Extracts. Quote. Now the educators, they call it ESP, positive thinking, right? Some of the people across the other side of the pond call it vibes, vibrations, astrology, and all those different things, you understand. But I call it what it is, and what it is? Mind power. Somebody needs to help us. Just give us a chance. Brothers across the nation, you got to get yourself together and unified. We need information. Pass on that. Write on information. That love power. Funky robot. I don't know what's going on. That mind power. JB experience. What it is what it is. You can't change it. Don't fool yourself. Deal with it. Oh wait, this is echo. So okay, this is. I don't know what to do with that.
I mean, what it be is what it were. I have the sense, but I don't. Yeah, I mean, sure, if it's good.
This is going to be James Brown. Brown. This is going to be James Brown then, the funky robot reference, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And I just, sorry, Echo, I can't make sense of it. And Bret actually would know the lyrics probably if he spent time with it, but cool. If memes are primordial ABCs of human culture, are psychedelic aesthetics the key expression of them in heritable culture? P.S. I chose $24.99 as the dollar amount because it's kind of funny. Must be my phenotype. I feel like someone has said that before, maybe the same person. If memes are primordial ABCs of human culture, are psychedelic aesthetics the key expression of them in heritable culture? I don't get it. I don't think so.
Psychedelics are a couple things. They are boundary breakers between natural borders of consciousness and unconsciousness. And that is basically functioning like it is basically an uptick in serendipity. In other words,
Uptick in serendipity.
Uptick in cognitive serendipity. So your thoughts become more garbagey, including your visual thoughts. And that's a tremendous amount of fun. And it can lead you to jump gaps that you would not jump being overly canalized in your normal cognitive state. So I don't know that it's an ultimate expression, but it's like a hack that allows you.
This is key expression. Psychedelic aesthetics. The key expression of them in heritable culture. Yeah, I like where you're going, but I think that made some more sense what you were just doing there.
Yeah.
I don't think psychedelic aesthetics is the key expression of memes and heritable culture quite works.
Let's just say psychedelics are a hack to escape the canalization of thought that is overly constrained for functionality. That is to say, you take the day off, and you allow yourself to jump tracks that you wouldn't otherwise jump in order to find thoughts that you couldn't otherwise reach and see things that aren't actually there. And
And you might consider taking the next morning off too,
sure.
depending.
Yeah, you could take a mental health and jubilation day.
Oh, we got a I don't even know what to call that, a lovey kissy emoji with a substantial dollar amount here from Al. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Al.
They want all the power to do all, and this is something different. Sorry, switching here. They want all the power to do all the things. And when it comes to your life tyranny, sorry. This is a Seuss poem. I was not reading it like a Seuss poem. I'm going to go back.
Yeah.
They want all the power to do all the things, and when it comes to your life, tyranny it brings. I do not like them. They will put us in camps. I do not like them. They're intellectual tramps. Yes.
There.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I like it.
I can't see all this because Google is weird. There we go. What do you think of the concept that group consciousness is a recent phenomenon, i.e. computer and the web, and we are merely waking our way through this information collectively with selection taking place, but in the wrong way?
No. Collective consciousness is ancient.
Yeah.
In fact,
it's weirder now.
That's true. It's gotten a little weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of noise on that channel. But yeah, it's ancient. We've talked about that elsewhere, but our argument is that we don't understand consciousness because we assume that it is individual in origin, and then it is a paradox because what good is it to have a subjective experience of anything? Whereas if you imagine that consciousness's purpose is to allow two brains to share an abstract idea so they can parallel process it, and then once you have the ability to take something and abstract it and pass it along with language, you also have the ability to juggle it in your own mind, and that's useful too. So individual consciousness is secondary.
Okay, there are only a few questions here. Most of them are just comments, so we're going to try to get through these. Jimmy Dugan from A League of Their Own. We are told that this is a quote from the character Jimmy Dugan in A League of Their Own. Are you growing? There's no growing. There's no growing in cancel culture. Roger Hornsby was my manager, and he called me a talking pile of pig shit, and did I grow? No. You know why? Because there's no growing in cancel culture.
The quote involves the term cancel culture?
I'm a little surprised about that.
A League of Their Own?
Yeah, that's what, 90s? I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, Zach, you want to look up A League of Their Own, see when it came out? Okay.
But you're right. There's no growing in cancel culture. That's true.
Right. Imperial College researchers reported emu-like red blood cells and collagen fibers in dinosaur fossils. Ancient art worldwide depicts dragons. How to set the probability that large land dinos coexisted with humans? No.
Yeah.
Emu-like red blood cells and collagen fibers in dinosaur fossils. I don't know that research. I'd be curious to see what the actual research says. But emu and the other, it's not ratites anymore. The whatever
Post-ratites.
No. The ratites has been renamed to include kiwis, the paleognaths.
Well done.
The old Jaws. So we got birds. There's paleognaths and there's neonaths with a silent G in the middle of both. And the paleognaths are considered to be the closest to the basal representation of birds that are living on our planet right now, the neonaths being every other bird out there. The paleognaths include the ratites, which are the big flightless birds, emus and cassowaries and ostriches and rheas. And I think apiornis, elephant birds, would have been in that list, but they're extinct now. They're on Madagascar. And kiwis are also in there. They're little flightless birds. So if they are, in fact, the closest representative that we have alive on Earth today to a basal bird, and I would put a lot of money on the evolutionary conclusion that birds and dinosaurs are, of all the clades that anyone could name, that most people could name, are each other's closest relatives, then it's not inherently surprising that we should find some emu-like characters in dinosaur fossils.
Right.
So, but then, ancient art, so that's one piece of evidence that doesn't say anything about big flying dinosaurs with humans. Ancient art worldwide depicts dragons. that doesn't surprise me either, but it's less clear how you sort of dismantle that scientifically as evidence for us having existed with dragons.
Yeah, I agree, and the chances of them having left no evidence where we would find it is pretty low.
Yeah.
All right, to answer your question, A League of Their Own came out in 1992.
1992.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was a pretty imprecise prediction. The 90s.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. It was suitably broad.
How-
You said birds and dinosaurs are they're each other's closest relatives. Just to be consistent with what we've said, birds are dinosaurs,
Mhm.
so it is birds and the non-avian dinosaurs that are each other's closest relatives.
Mhm.
There, we've closed off one attack vector.
I look forward to the moment when the attacks are at that level.
All right,
Yeah, I'm in. I'll go there on those.
I'll drink to that.
Okay, how about hashtag unlock the doc for the Twitter hashtag for Dr. Seuss?
I like it, but we've already
We
set
already
this
did
in
it.
motion.
Loose the
and a lot-
Seuss, unlock
yeah.
the doc. So maybe if people are listening to this and have the space in their tweets using both, could be useful to see if just to start to collect those. But hashtag unlock the doc, DOC, and hashtag loose the Seuss.
Loose the Seuss.
Okay, we got just a few more here. An idea. Could plants evolve toxins easily destroyed by fire and cooking? Seed dispersal by organisms capable of technological civilization seems like it could be a good strategy.
Wait. What?
So, I mean, there's two different questions there. Plants do evolve toxins that are easily destroyed by fire and cooking, but not because fire and cooking existed at the point that they evolved those toxins. Proteins are
Do they really
denatured.
mean fire or heat?
It says fire/cooking.
I know. Well, okay. So
I can't mind read, so I'm just reading.
I know, but just in terms of parsing the question to figure out what we're responding to,
hmm
denaturing proteins by heat is a very common thing.
Right. So then that pre-exists humans using fire or cooking, is what I was saying.
Right. So maybe I missed what the question is shooting for.
Just could plants. So the question seems to imagine that maybe there aren't toxins that are destroyed by fire and cooking, and there are. Basically, all proteins get what is called denatured, which means they lose their tertiary protein structure,
Yep.
and so they don't then do the thing that they would normally do, but they still have a caloric and nutritional value. It's true for all proteins become denatured at high heat, although some are they're all adapted to different levels of heat.
So I believe cooking also breaks down secondary structure, which is
That may be the
part
case.
of why we get a lot more nutrition out of things like meat.
I don't remember. I don't remember if that's the case, but that may be the case. But yeah, so the question I think presumes that there isn't already structure that is in fact broken down by heat, and I think in some ways it sort of reverses causality. It's not like plants don't need to search for the thing. Like humans started cooking, and really this was a hypothesis that was already in circulation. But Richard Wrangham, in his excellent primatologist Richard Wrangham, in his I forgot 2000 something book called Catching Fire, really spells out the hypothesis in depth that it may be actually cooking that helped make us fully human. That it was that there are no, even at the point that anthropologists started doing their thing in like the late 19th century. Yeah, 19th century. And there were some tales from like missionaries and anthropologists about finding cultures that didn't use fire. Those are almost certainly specious. That was probably some combination of some sort of like racist imaginings, and they just didn't look very hard. So all known cultures have used, all known modern cultures, including back into the 19th century, have used fire, and cooking. In Wrangham's formulation, and I'm compelled by it, does so many things, and we're not going to spell them out here. This is another thing that we do in our book, including making many more calories available to those who eat cooked food as opposed to eating the same food raw. It also makes the time spent chewing much lower, and that sounds like this trivial thing, but apparently there's some analyses that suggest that if humans, not including all the soft crap that we eat now. But if humans, like typical hunter-gatherers, not at the extremes, not at the poles where the diet is all meat, but with a somewhat typical ratio of like meat to plant matter, we're eating entirely non-cooked food. We would spend, I think it's something like 5 or 6 hours every single day just chewing. And that actually obviously does get in the way of doing other things at that point.
Yep.
Do you have something to add?
You can multitask, but anyway, I would just add that with respect to the denaturing of proteins, the way to think about it is not that it has to evolve, that the protein can be deactivated by human technologies. The way to think about it is that the enzymes themselves are predicated on an environment in which they function. And basically you have a protein, which is a string of amino acids that has lots of little charges on the surface. And those charges they find a conformation that is most stable relative to a given pH and a given temperature. And the point is, if you change the pH and temperature, what you do is you change the affinities of these charges, and they end up finding some conformation that doesn't actually work. So the point is, the enzyme has a tolerance for heat that is based on what the creature in nature is encountering. And then what we do with heat is we put enough heat in there that the point is it increases the activity of the substrate, and the thing finds some folding pattern that just isn't functional as a natural thing. So it's not something that has to evolve for humans. It's something that exists there that humans can exploit.
Yeah. Bingo. Someone asks, not for the first time, will you address the revolutionary phenotype? We are aware of it, but neither of us have read it yet. And I guess you could say we're avoiding it, but we're not intentionally avoiding it. We just haven't done it yet. So we have nothing to say about it at this point because we have not read it. Never forget Aaron Schwartz. Yes. Best of luck in all you do. Thank you. And is Zach, or Zach spelled Zach, or Zach? And is it short for some homophone of Zachary? Would like to get this right in my behind the curtain appreciation tips. So it's ZACK in its short form, and is in fact short for Zachary with a ZACHARY.
Yep.
There you go. 3 more questions, and then we're out for today. Who has more esteem in the biology research community, Dr. Seuss or Dr. Dre? Why did you and your brother decide to give Quentin Tarantino his big break?
Yes. What?
I don't know. I have no idea.
All right.
I don't know what that means. And I just said I'd read all the rest of them, so that we will pick up some next week that we missed from the first hour. I'm just reading all the ones that came in this era because there weren't that many. Slavery predates history. Natural and sexual selection directs the evolution of species, but how much of an effect did market selection have? And then I'm just going to stop there because I don't know what this last one is. There's a third part to the question. I don't know what it's referring to. How much of an effect did market selection have? I don't know what that means.
I'm trying to read it.
So slavery does predate history, for sure.
Directs evolution of species, but how much? I don't know what the question means.
Okay.
I'll figure it out.
Okay, so I'm going to find one. I don't want to end there. I'm going to find one more question if I can figure it out from the first hour. Okay, here's 2 questions. 1 comment, 1 question. I just became the uncle of a second little girl. Thank you for helping me come up with gifts to bring along this week. Awesome.
Excellent.
And what is your recommendation on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for people in their 20s, 30s, and early 60s? You two are my only hope.
Well, we've covered this a little bit. It depends on your situation. I would say it's lowest priority for somebody in their 20s. The later in your 20s you are, the more you might consider it. I think with all of these things, the danger is that we don't know what we don't know, and that there's a long-term hazard with all of the vaccines that is significant and not being properly discussed. So delaying is valuable, but you're not going to be able, if it would take 25 years to know for sure whether these vaccines are going to have an important impact that we don't foresee, like causing an autoimmunity or tumors or who knows. You can't wait 25 years. That's not the scale at which this matters. And so you're going to have to make a call. And the problem is you're not going to make a safe call. You're going to make a call based on two things that are lousy. One is the risk of getting COVID and the harms that come from it. And the other is the risk that there's something about these vaccines that we don't know and we're going to find out too late. And, those are things you have to juggle, but there's no simple answer here.
There is no simple answer. I do think the question was specifically about Johnson & Johnson compared to the other vaccines. So let me speak a little bit to that.
Sure.
We got asked last week about whether, in light of the relatively few serious adverse effects from the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, if our priors had changed about our sense of their risk. And I said no, and Bret said a little. And I think I want to correct the record and say, yeah, a little. The longer it is since they started being rolled out massively without very many serious adverse effects, the better I feel about them. And that's not to say that there aren't possible long-term side effects that could not possibly have begun to manifest yet, but I feel a little bit better about them. And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine obviously does not have that going for it because it's brand new. That said, I would prefer the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine, and I very much hope that Americans and people all over the world, but I know that Americans at this point are not given a choice, that if you show up at a vaccine spot, you're given whatever it is they have, and so far that's been between Moderna and Pfizer, and soon that will be between Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, but you don't have any way of knowing in advance what you'll be getting, nor do you have a choice at the moment. Why would I prefer Johnson & Johnson at this point, even though it doesn't even have the several-month track record that Moderna and Pfizer have? Because, as we have said many times previously, while it is not a traditional vaccine, it has one very new thing associated with it, whereas the mRNA vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, have two very new things. And so the two very new things with Moderna and Pfizer are the mRNA, which is like the active ingredient, delivered via lipid nanoparticles. Both of those are brand new in humans as of the end of last year. And then the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, like AstraZeneca Oxford, is a DNA vaccine. As such, it is actually classified as gene therapy rather than a vaccine, but it's doing something similar to what the mRNA vaccines are doing, just kind of one step earlier. But it is wrapped in, its delivery mechanism is an adenovirus, which is a much more tried and true delivery mechanism than the lipid nanoparticles that the mRNA vaccines are using. And so in choosing between two vaccines that are using brand new technology, but one of them also uses an additional kind of brand new technology, I prefer the one that uses one kind of brand new technology to those that use two kinds of brand new technologies. And if you are in your early 60s, I would probably get it. And if you're in your 20s and 30s, as Bret said, I don't think those are yet available to anyone without other underlying conditions. So that's a sort of a luxurious position, as is the one that we're in at this point, not having to make the decision, right?
So I would add that you're right about the totally new lipid nanoparticle delivery process being more risky than the adenovirus. But I would say or a big part, to me, the lion's share of the reason that the adenovirus delivery mechanism is safer is that we have an evolutionary history with adenoviruses.
Right.
So,
yes, you're right. You're right.
More so than the fact that this has a track record. It has some track record, but it's still new.
No, that's the better. That's the better reason.
It's the better reason is just that the likelihood that adenoviruses are going to be dangerous to you is low because we get them and they're minor. Mm-hmm. And so using them as a delivery mechanism is new, but your evolutionary preparedness is not.
Yeah, that's great. Good correction. Thank you. It's possible that almost more than 3.5 hours in that we are done for the day.
Whoa!
What do you think? Are we done for the day? Do some logistical announcements and sign off?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so we will be back in a week, 12:30 Pacific, usual time, usual place, right here in our very own sauna with our very own carnivorans behind us. We are grateful to you, and we appreciate all the support via super chat questions and by joining our Patreons. And if you are not in a position to or do not feel like contributing that way, but you appreciate us, please consider giving good reviews on the places where you're listening to the podcast. Although I should have said that when this was actually something that was going on at the audio podcast. But if you also listen to the audio podcast, consider positive reviews there. I think comments on YouTube help as well, although I'm less sure about that. Why are you looking at me like that?
I don't know. We're at the end of the podcast.
Oh my God. Okay. I'm going to say to you,
Yes?
love the people who you live with. I know you do. And do love you back. And eat good food. And get outside. And no more crazy eyes, man.
No. I was trying to write poetry in my head. I was not particularly thinking about what facial expression
That much was
I
clear.
had, yes. We've come to the end of this DarkHorse podcast. We're going to go drink. We'll be drinking at last. I don't know.
Do it again. That was good. One more, and then
We have
then we'll
come to the end of this DarkHorse podcast. We're going to go drinking. We'll be drinking at last, or something along those lines. I don't know. It was better in the earlier iteration. You can all scroll back through the...
You were supposed to stop at the end of your little couplet and let us go.
Oh, I was?
Yeah. Try again. Third time's a
But
charm.
it's going to get worse and worse.
I know it is.
And that is not the result of drinking, which they know. We've had cameras on us.
Well, but sometimes that goes to one or the other of us. Who knows what we've got going on under the table?
All right. We
We are wearing pants.
We have come to the end of this DarkHorse podcast. It is time to go drinking. We'll be drinking at last. Sorta.